What's up, guys? Welcome to Tales of Nerdia. Today we are talking about the interview that Togashi and Ishida had together discussing Ishida's new manga, not a serialization, but a one-shot of Hisoka's past. And I will link to the article in the description below. I want you guys to read it. I'm not going to read it word for word to you, but I want to talk about some specific points. So if you want to pause right now and go read it, go ahead. Link is in the description. There is a little bit of spoilers in there for the chapter that Ishida wrote. So just be careful of that. You'll see when they ask Togashi, what did you think of the chapter? He starts off, well, the ending. So I'm not going to talk about that piece specifically, but a little bit of the dialogue afterwards as well. So this is written by the author of Tokyo Ghoul. Very interesting stuff. I'm going to analyze some of the things that are said here, and we're going to discuss it from the perspective of a Hunter x Hunter fan. Let's get to it. Okay, so the very beginning of the interview, you see, we're told that Ishida is a huge fan of Hunter x Hunter. He used to draw Hisoka when he was younger, and it's been a long time that this manga has been in the works. It was originally brought up by Ishida's editors because they knew he was a fan. It was brought up that he was a fan of Hunter x Hunter, specifically Hisoka, and it was actually their suggestion that he write a backstory or a side story for Hisoka. And Ishida, really excited about this, they get approval from Togashi. So Togashi says, do whatever you like. They did ask, is there any specific thing that he should really stick to, or if Togashi had any ideas that he would like Ishida to implement. But Togashi basically gave him free reign of this character. So Togashi has a lot of respect for Ishida, and he does talk about later how he does read Tokyo Ghoul, admires the characters. We'll get into that a little bit. But basically gave Ishida free reign. And Ishida took this very seriously. He threw away several drafts and started to overthink it so much. And it actually gave him, it caused some stress for him, and he kind of hit a mental block at one point and said I almost considered giving up manga, or not specifically those words. But let's get into some of this analysis. So I have the interview up here. So in the beginning, they exchange pleasantries. They start getting into how Ishida liked to draw Hisoka, specifically in the scene at Heaven's Arena where he's in the shower and he lets his hair down. They start talking about that a little bit, and Togashi talks about his inspiration for doing that. He likes seeing that character in their natural state, basically. So if they comb their hair back, he likes to see it down. Or if it's sticking up, he just likes to see them natural. And that's what his inspiration for drawing his characters like that is. And they also say, oh, doesn't Crollo have a scene like that? And awkwardly in this interview, Togashi kind of changes subject. And he says, out of the characters in Tokyo Ghoul, I like Juzo the best. I like Hisoka too, and they're kind of similar. They're a bit crazy, yeah, I think we get that. And I like how they enjoy hurting themselves. This next line is very important. I'll keep hurting him nicely in Hunter x Hunter as well. And then he laughs. So he's going to keep doing that, which means it could be a hint that Hisoka is going to live. And he's just going to, in every fight, punish him, but keep him around. This gave me a lot of hope, because initially when I heard that a backstory for Hisoka was being released, even though it's technically not canon, I was saddened, because in the video I just posted this morning, I said, if the next chapter is a background story of Hisoka, I believe that he will die. But this is being written by a different author, not Togashi. So, this little line of dialogue, I'll keep hurting him nicely in Hunter x Hunter as well, and then he laughs. Pretty sadistic of Togashi, reveals a little bit about him, and he said in other interviews that, you know, he's thought of killing off main characters, and his editors basically won't let him. It looks like he doesn't want to kill Hisoka, he just wants to keep torturing him. Togashi, you are sick. Another interesting point in the interview, they start going into the suits, the cards, how it uses hearts, diamonds, spade, club. Those suits are always used with Hisoka's dialogue. And one of the things Ishida did to prepare for writing this manga was study those very closely. He basically went through all of the manga and put little post-it notes and little things to indicate where Hisoka showed up. And he wanted to learn about the character and study those. And Togashi basically says, I'll read this to you here. So Ishida says, I marked all the pages Hisoka appears in. I tried to figure out a pattern in the suit marks in his lines. And Togashi says, I'm choosing those by intuition, and he laughs. And Ishida was a little surprised, says, you don't have any rules? So Togashi, not really, just that Hisoka uses a heart with people he likes. And that's something that I point out a lot in my reactions. And I have tried to, just in the past few chapters, analyze the other suits. And to me, yeah, they did seem somewhat interchangeable. But Ishida went further, much further than I did. And he says, when I analyzed it, I thought diamond was used often when Hisoka is being serious. And clover, which is actually the clubs, gets used more when he is thinking something over. So this is very interesting. I'm going to pay attention to this more in the future chapters. You know, if Hisoka is still around. And Togashi still says, though, since I'm choosing with my intuition, it's possible I'm unconsciously creating those patterns. So the heart he is consciously using, but the other ones he is not. Interesting. And they don't mention the spade at all in this conversation. Togashi also talks about Hisoka as a character, and he describes him as whimsical. Which I could definitely see. He just kind of goes with the flow. He's just after fighting. And I want to read this part to you. When I want him to do something the most is when he is least likely to move for me. It's easier to step back, not think about anything. Then he will move on his own. It's the same way right now in the main story. I just create the surroundings, environment, battle setups, and leave Hisoka's movements to Hisoka. Then his character bursts out for me. And then Ishida makes a weird comment here. You're right. I see him bursting out just with my imagination. And then he laughs. I wonder what he could be referencing there. And after Ishida's little joke there, Togashi throws in adds, but I had to kind of put on the brakes. And Ishida, you did? Togashi says, Hisoka wanted to do more, but there were some places where I put on the brakes inside myself, and I regret that a little bit. Very interesting. So where do you think there were parts where Togashi put on the brakes? Well, he had a lot of involvement in the Hunter exam, so I don't think it was there. He was not involved in Killua's little arc where Gon goes to save Killua. He's back at Heaven's Arena, and I felt like he did a pretty good job at Heaven's Arena. And following that, during the auction in York City, I'd say he was pretty heavily involved there. So the next arc would be Greed Island, and we did see Hisoka here. He shows up because he is searching for a Nen exorcist on Greed Island. He has a confrontation with the Phantom Troop, and very interesting exchange there. This is where we learn Machi would hunt him till the end of the earth. He also had some involvement with Gon and Killua, helping them in the volleyball match. But that's pretty much the extent of it, so not a whole lot of action from him. What he did in the volleyball match against Razor was very cool, but he was not extremely influential in that arc. While he pretty much saved the day with the volleyball match, there is room for him to do more there. Either it's wreaking havoc, maybe a confrontation, an actual battle with someone in the Phantom Troop. Not necessarily sure where Hisoka could have gone there. I don't see any immediate opportunities unless he's decided to stick around with Gon and Killua and help them out more against Genthru. Not that they needed it. Then there's the Chimera Ant arc, but he was not involved in that at all, so I don't see that Togashi put the brakes because he really never hit the gas there, if you know what I'm saying. finally, the election arc. And in the election arc, I think it could be more likely than Greed Island that this is where he may have put the brakes on Hisoka. In the beginning of the election arc, he is seen voting, he's casting a fake vote, but he wants to find, during this election, he wanted to find some strong hunters. And maybe this is where Togashi decided to put on the brakes and not give Hisoka a fight with a really strong opponent, even though he is sizing up the Zodiac. And at that point, he does decide, I guess it'll have to be the Zodiac, one of the Zodiac, that he fights. Until Illumi shows up behind him, and that distracts Hisoka. Illumi decides to get his help. And we saw a lot of discussion between the two that was very interesting. And he could have played a more critical role here. You know, he does kill Goto here, but the point where he is hiding and Illumi has confronted Killua, he is deciding what to do here, who he should kill so that someone else will want to seek vengeance on him and he can fight them. And maybe this is a point where he decided to pull back a little bit. Togashi decided to put the brakes and, you know, just let Hisoka be and kind of take him out of the arc. You know, he does fight some of the temporary hunters. You know, he did kill Goto. He tried to trick Illumi by sending him a fake map, things like that. But at some point, Hisoka just kind of exits from here. So there were a few opportunities in the election arc for Hisoka to be more involved. This is great insight on how this author thinks, how Togashi thinks, and he created these characters. They now have personalities of their own since the manga has grown, and he feels that he is no longer in control of them. They control the story. He puts them in certain predicaments, certain situations, and they will do what they want. And he even talks about the dialogue. I think manga is more interesting when characters aren't under control. When I write manga, I first think of a rough outline, but when I actually write characters, sometimes they say things that are completely different from the storyline I thought of, but I think this line really fits them. And then I have to give up the original story, but I think it's much more interesting when that happens. So he's just really letting the creative juices flow and just going with it, how it kind of just comes out, you know, pen to paper. Very interesting because Togashi, a lot of people admire him just for his well-thought-out storylines and how in-depth they can get, specifically the York New City arc and the Chimera Ant arc. And as far as giving up on an original story, I feel like this may have happened in the Chimera Ant arc because we start off, it's basically like a siege where Gon, Killua, and Kite enter the NGL, and they're pretty much just working their way towards the ants' home and destroying ants, stronger and stronger ants each time until they're basically stopped by Pito. And then we have some training pieces. They send in the reinforcements. There's the stronger hunters are doing things. And when Gon and Killua are brought back in, we have this strange moment of, you know, some politics going on. Then we have the selection. The whole thing about the selection of the Chimera Ant arc is probably my least favorite. I absolutely love this arc. And once they finally go into the castle, pretty much everything in there I love. Even the little bits with Bizef were pretty interesting. But that spot in between where they re-enter, that's when there's this strange piece in the middle of that arc. And maybe this is where he's talking about he has to give up on an idea at one point. So the interviewer asks Togashi, what impressions do you have after reading Ishida's storyboard? This is where he reveals the end of the manga. I have not found it fully translated yet. There are a few pages translated on Imager I saw and a few other places, but it's only about 5 pages. And I will do a separate video of that once it is fully translated, or maybe half of it, because it is very long, but I don't want to spoil it for myself, so I'm not going to look at the raw chapter. But the full raw chapter is out if you want to go take a look at that. So he's talks a little bit about the end of this, and then he says about something with Hisoka. And then Togashi says, I actually had that thought of using this later in the main story, talking about something Hisoka did. So another hint that Hisoka may not die in this battle with Chrollo, because Togashi has plans for him in the future. Now, maybe he gave up on this idea of using something specific for Hisoka. That's entirely possible, but I like to see this, and maybe this is a confirmation bias, me searching for little things in this interview that will hint at Hisoka living, but I really like this part. He does say that basically says he has future plans for Hisoka and is still thinking about ways that Hisoka can use his Nen. He compliments Ishida too, says Ishida has a good sense for using Nen, and says it's really interesting when different people have the same thought. He goes on to compliment Ishida on the way he does characters and his battles, and there's a scene in the beginning, the very first page of Ishida's work for Hisoka's background. Minor spoiler, just the first page, don't worry, but where you see Hisoka pretty much lying face down. So it looks like something happened to Hisoka, and Togashi was really interested in that and asks Ishida, do you have an explanation for why that first scene, what happened before that first scene? And Ishida says, no, I wanted to leave that open-ended. And he says that in the drafts, he did have ideas for that, but didn't like them. You know, he said, maybe I'd make Hisoka come from a rich family or a poor family, and he tossed around these ideas and says, I felt like as soon as I bring that in, he stops being Hisoka. So he didn't want to go too far back into Hisoka's past. And Togashi agrees, says that's true. Digging into a character's past is difficult. It's like no matter what story you tell, it won't surpass the reader's imagination. Rather than making it clear, it's more fascinating to leave some things unknown. And we've seen this a lot in the Hunter x Hunter series. There are still a lot of things about maybe minor characters, but very interesting characters that we just haven't found out about. We even heard about this Saren group that used to involve Netero. This was revealed during the election arc, and there was a part where some hunters were trying to revive the Saren group, but Hisoka took care of those guys. So again, Togashi compliments him on the way that he wrote that intro and that he didn't go too far into the past. Now, this is a great part. Ishida asks Togashi, do you have any idea of Hisoka's past? And Togashi just says, I don't. That's why I try not to think about it. But now I'm thinking I might one day be alright writing about a time in his past just a little bit before Ishida-san's manga. Deciding how far back is difficult, though. This is a huge compliment to Ishida that Togashi loves his work. Later in this interview, he asks Ishida permission to write a story of how Hisoka started off on page 1 of Ishida's iteration of Hisoka's past. So Togashi completely admiring Ishida's work. It's nice to see the respect that both of these mangaka have for each other. And towards the end of the interview, they start talking about family because Togashi says, I'd probably write about Hisoka around like middle school age or maybe early high school age. And if he went further back than that, he would have to write about Hisoka's family, and that's not something he's completely interested in doing. They have an interesting discussion about how parents in general in manga can get in the way of a main character, or they are just there to stop the main character from what their goal is. I'm not going to read all the details of that part to you. I think it's a very interesting read, so go ahead and check it out. And one thing that I took away from this, I started thinking about manga that I have read, and this has come to, I've thought about this before, just when I notice, I believe it was in Haikyuu, where I was just thinking, like, where are Hinata's parents? Why are they not showing up to his volleyball games? Or really the other characters' parents aren't showing up to these volleyball games. And I think that speaks to the audience that these manga are typically directed towards. You know, in the US, it's an older audience, but in Japan, it is for a younger generation. They don't necessarily want to read about someone's parents. You know, they're kind of the mindset of a child is they're almost in their own world. I don't want to say selfish, but that the world revolves around them. And then when you bring that into a manga form, the world can revolve around these characters with not so much interference from parents. So, think about some of your favorite manga or a lot of shonen that you read, and really how much involvement do parents have. And then as it applies specifically to this manga, to Hunter x Hunter, Togashi says, I thought it'd be better if Gon, or he says if he, but he means Gon, didn't have parents to begin with. Eventually, that became a story about searching for his parent, and then I decided on the concept of making his parent a really awful person. Which is pretty funny. I like that part of the interview because Jing, he gets a lot of shit from all the other characters about how he's a bad dad, but he did kind of guide Gon and create situations for Gon to get stronger if he decided to search for him. But then there's these little, really jerk moves in between, specifically the Greed Island part where he says, if Gon's a coward and wants to bring someone with him, send him to Kite. And if he wants to come alone, send him to me. And he's even criticized by the person that he's saying that to. And then it ends where Togashi pretty much asks permission from Ishida, can I write a story of how Hisoka ended up lying on the ground, and, can I use some of the setting and some of the characters that you used in your manga? And Ishida, of course, is honored. He says, I was worried about even making this storyboard, so to have Sensei speak that way about it, I'm honored. I'm really happy. And in the final line there, Togashi says, don't expect too much. If I ever draw it, I'll show it to you. So, fantastic interview. I just love seeing the actual person behind this manga, because we speculate so much about what's going on in the author's head or what's going on in these characters' heads, and now we even see that the author sometimes doesn't know. He just kind of lets things flow and puts characters in situations, but whatever happens kind of happens. So that's all I got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed. Go ahead and read the interview if you haven't already. It is extremely interesting. Lots of hints in here about what's to come in the future, and just getting a look into the mind of the author of Hunter x Hunter, and a little bit into the author of Tokyo Ghoul as well. Also, go ahead and comment, where do you think that Togashi put on the brakes with Hisoka? What arcs do you think he could have been more involved in? Also, let me know, do you think that the little hints are, well, what I think are hints, do you think those are hints that Hisoka is going to live against the fight with Chrollo? Who knows? Maybe I'm thinking about it too much. Anyways, give me a comment. Go ahead and like, subscribe. I will see you guys very soon. Bye.